The planet Zarmina was a whisper in the cosmos, a ghostly echo of its former self. Its cities, once gleaming with iridescent scales under its twin suns, now lay in ruins, overrun by shadows and monstrous creatures that thrived in the chaos of a broken world. It was into this forsaken place that Jack's exploration ship, the Odyssey, ventured, driven by a faint signal of life detected amidst the desolation. Jack, a seasoned explorer and former military pilot, was no stranger to the dangers of alien worlds. His mission was to chart lost civilizations, to reclaim what could be salvaged from the clutches of time and neglect. Yet, Zarmina presented a unique challenge. The distress signal was unexpected, a variable that did not fit his usual expeditions. As the Odyssey descended through the turbulent atmosphere, Jack surveyed the landscape with a practiced eye. The ruins were extensive, the devastation complete. It was hard to imagine anything surviving in such conditions. Yet, as he prepared to land, the signal pulsed stronger, beckoning him toward a large, crumbling structure that might once have been a palace or a temple. He set the Odyssey down on a relatively stable patch of ground and armed himself with his gear. The air outside was breathable, a rare piece of good fortune in his line of work, but it carried a foul stench of decay. With cautious steps, he made his way towards the source of the signal, his boots crunching on the debris. The inside of the structure was dark, pierced occasionally by shafts of light that broke through the gaping holes in the walls. Jack's flashlight cut through the darkness, revealing frescoes of celestial beauty, now marred by the passage of time and the violence of the planet's new inhabitants. The sound of his footsteps disturbed the eerie silence, a reminder that he was not welcome here. It was then that he heard it, a soft whimper, barely audible above the whisper of the wind through shattered corridors. He followed the sound, turning down a collapsed hallway and into what looked like a sanctuary. There, amidst the ruins, huddled against a cracked altar, was Zara. She was smaller than he'd expected, her body covered in fine feathers that shimmered with a spectral light. Her eyes, wide and luminous, watched him cautiously as he approached. She was unmistakably of the avian species that lore said had once ruled Zarmina. But there was no time for wonder. The air shifted, a low growl reverberated through the hall, and shadows moved with predatory intent. Without a second thought, Jack raised his weapon. The creatures that emerged from the shadows were like nothing he had catalogued before. They moved with a disturbing blend of insectoid and reptilian features, their bodies covered in chitinous armor. They were the monsters that had taken over Zarmina, and they were not pleased to find their territory disturbed. Jack fired, the sound of his gun echoing through the ancient halls. The creatures recoiled, but they did not retreat. As they regrouped for another attack, Jack knew he had to get Zara out of there. He moved quickly to her side, speaking in a low, calm voice to reassure her. She looked up at him, fear and hope in her eyes, and when he extended his hand, she took it. Together, they ran. Jack led the way back through the corridors, retracing his steps as the creatures pursued them with relentless determination. They were almost at the ship when a massive form blocked their path, an alpha of the pack, larger and more terrifying than the rest. Jack pushed Zara behind him and prepared for a final stand. The battle was fierce and frantic. Jack was a skilled fighter, but the Alpha was a monster evolved to dominate a world left to the wild. It took all of Jack's military training and a few hastily deployed explosive traps to finally bring the creature down. Breathing heavily, Jack glanced back at Zara. She was watching him with a mix of awe and gratitude. "We need to leave," he said, and she nodded, still clinging to his hand. As they lifted off from the surface of Zarmina, Jack watched the ruins disappear below them, his mind racing with questions about Zara and the monsters. Zarmina was more than just a mission now. It was a mystery, and one he intended to solve. But first, he had to ensure Zara's safety. She was the key to understanding everything. The abandoned world, the monsters, and perhaps even the fate of her people. As the Odyssey soared away from the crumbling ruins of what once was a majestic temple on Zarmina, Jack watched the horizon fade into a blur of storm clouds and twilight. The ship's engines hummed a steady, reassuring tune, contrasting sharply with the recent chaos. Zara, now seated across from Jack in the cramped cockpit, wrapped herself with a thermal blanket he had provided. Her feathers, still shimmering faintly, seemed less vibrant than when he'd first seen her, a sign of her ordeal. "Are you able to tell me what happened to your planet?" Jack asked, keeping his eyes on the controls as he navigated through the upper atmosphere. Zara's voice was soft but clear. Long ago, Zarmina was thriving, full of life and joy. But after the sky fell, everything changed. Her eyes darkened with the memory. The monsters came from the shadows of the disaster, growing stronger in the ruins of our cities, feeding on the remnants of our people. Jack nodded, processing the information. The sky fell? You mean a meteor impact or something similar? Possibly, she replied, her gaze drifting to the window, watching the stars begin to emerge as night enveloped the planet. It was before my time, but the elders spoke of a great calamity from the heavens that shattered our world. The Odyssey finally cleared the atmosphere, and the tranquility of space enveloped them. Jack set the coordinates for a nearby safe zone, a small outpost he often used as a midway station on his explorations. He glanced at Zara, considering her next words carefully. "We need to rest and plan our next move. The outpost has supplies, and we can stay there safely for a while." Zara nodded, her expression grateful yet tinged with worry. The journey to the outpost was uneventful, but the silence between them was filled with mutual contemplation of the desperate situation on Zarmina. Upon arriving at the outpost, Jack led Zara through the series of security checks. The outpost was small, just a few modular units connected by sealed corridors, but it was fortified and stocked with enough supplies for extended stays. As they settled in, Jack gave Zara a tour, explaining the various safety protocols and emergency measures. "We'll be safe here from any pursuit," he assured her, showing her the surveillance feeds that monitored the surrounding space. That night, as Zarmina's twin suns set in a distant echo outside the viewing window, they sat down with ration packs warmed from the ship's modest galley. Jack observed Zara as she cautiously examined the food, her curiosity overcoming her initial hesitance. "How do you feel about all this?" Jack asked, breaking the silence. "It's overwhelming," she admitted, looking around the small dining area. "I never imagined I would leave Zarmina, let alone with a human." Jack smiled slightly. "Well, I never imagined I'd be rescuing an alien from monsters. Guess we're both having a week of firsts." As they ate, Jack mulled over the strategic options. "Tomorrow, I want to scan the area for any traces of your people. If there are survivors, maybe we can help them or at least understand more about what we're dealing with." Zara's eyes lit up with a flicker of hope. "Many have hidden, too afraid to fight. But your weapons and tactics, maybe there's a chance." After the meal, Jack showed Zara to a guest module where she could rest. "Try get some sleep," he suggested. "Tomorrow will be busy." Alone in his module, Jack reviewed the data from their escape, analyzing the monster encounters. Each species seemed adapted to different environmental niches, suggesting a complex ecosystem, possibly thrown into overdrive by the same cataclysm that had shattered Zarmina's society. He plotted a series of reconnaissance drones for the morning, determined to cover as much ground as possible. The night passed in a tense quiet, both of them aware that the next day could bring new dangers. But for now, in the cold silence of space, they found a temporary peace, the kind that comes from shared struggles and the faint, stubborn glow of hope. The next morning, Jack was up early, checking the systems of the Odyssey, while Zara remained asleep. The quiet hum of the outpost was a stark contrast to the chaotic dangers of Zarmina, yet the tranquility was a mask that hid the restless planning of the day ahead. With a cup of strong coffee in hand, Jack reviewed the flight path of the drones, ensuring they would cover the areas Zara had mentioned might still harbor survivors, or, at the very least, clues to the disaster that had befallen her world. By the time Zara joined him, the drones were already dispatching, tiny specks against the starry backdrop outside the outpost control room. She approached quietly, her movements still cautious, an inherent wariness in her step. "Good morning," Jack greeted without turning. "The drones are out. We should start getting the first feed soon." Zara nodded, her eyes fixed on the screens displaying various angles and perspectives from the drones. "What are you hoping to find?" "Anything that might tell us more about the monsters, where they come from, how they behave, and, of course, any sign of other survivors." Jack adjusted a dial, zooming in on a particularly ravaged area of Zarmina's surface. As they watched the live feeds, Zara pointed out landmarks, now barely recognizable. There, she paused a frame, was a gathering place, like your city squares. "We called it the Sun Ring." Jack noted the location. "We'll focus a drone there. Maybe there's something we can learn." He made a few adjustments, redirecting one of the drones to the coordinates Zara had indicated. While the drone scoured Zarmina's broken landscape, Jack turned to Zara. "Tell me more about your people, Zara. Understanding your culture, your technology, might give us an edge." Zara seemed to gather her thoughts, her eyes lingering on the screen before settling on Jack. "We were peaceful, mostly. We valued knowledge, the arts, harmony with nature. Our technology was advanced, but always integrated with the environment. That's why, when the disaster struck, we were unprepared for the aftermath." Jack listened intently, his mind racing through scenarios, tactics learned in his military days that might help in such a context. "And the monsters, any idea where they came from?" "They appeared after the calamity, evolved rapidly, as if the disaster triggered something dormant. They're not natural to Zarmina, at least they weren't before." Her voice held a note of sadness, a mourning for her planet's corrupted evolution. Their conversation was interrupted by an alert from one of the drones. On the screen, amid the ruins of the Sun Ring, several creatures lurked, noticeably different in build and behavior from those that had attacked them during their escape. These were smaller, more cautious. "Looks like scavengers," Jack observed, studying their movements. "They avoid the larger ruins, stick to shadows. Different from the aggressors we encountered yesterday." Zara watched, her interest piqued. "Yes, this is new. They weren't here when I last." Her voice trailed off, caught in a memory. Jack documented the behavior, making a mental note to compare it against their previous encounters. "There's a pattern here. The ecology of this planet is adapting to some new norms. It's not random, it's survival." The day continued with more discoveries, each drone feed providing pieces of a larger, complex puzzle. As night approached and the feed slowed, Jack and Zara reviewed the data, plotting out potential safe zones and areas that warranted closer inspection. "I think we should go down there," Jack proposed, pointing to a less devastated region that had shown signs of irregular but possibly intelligent movements. "If there are survivors, they might be hiding there." Zara agreed, a flicker of determination lighting her eyes. "Let's find them." That evening, as they prepared the gear they would need for a ground mission, Jack felt a renewed sense of purpose. The outpost had offered them a respite, a moment to gather strength, but the real work lay ahead. Together, they would face Zarmina's secrets, uncovering the past to secure a future, perhaps not just for Zara, but for her entire species. Early the next morning, Jack and Zara were prepping the Odyssey for descent back to Zarmina. Today's mission was riskier. They weren't just scouting from a safe distance. They were going into potentially hostile territory, driven by the hope of finding survivors and possibly turning the tide against the monstrous inhabitants. Jack checked his weapon systems, while Zara loaded up on supplies. They both knew that going into less devastated areas might mean encountering more sophisticated threats, either from the monsters themselves or from automated defense systems that could still be active after the calamity. "Are you sure about this?" Jack asked as he handed Zara a lightweight armor vest. "It could get rough out there." Zara nodded, her expression firm. "I need to see if anyone else survived. I can't turn back now. Not when we're this close. Jack admired her courage. Despite her delicate appearance, she had a resilience that matched his own battle-hardened resolve. All right, let's do this. The Odyssey descended through the atmosphere, turbulent winds buffeting the hull as they approached the target region. Jack piloted the ship with practiced ease, but the tension in the cockpit was palpable. As they landed, the surrounding landscape offered a stark contrast to the ruinous zones they'd seen before. Here, remnants of Zarmina's advanced technology were evident. Solar arrays and wind turbines, partially destroyed, still stood as monuments to a fallen civilization. Stepping out of the Odyssey, Jack and Zara moved cautiously. Jack's scanner beeped intermittently, picking up residual energy signatures that suggested active technology nearby. They approached what looked like a control station, its exterior scorched but structurally sound. "This could be what we're looking for," Jack said, examining the entry panel. The door was sealed, but his portable hacking device soon had it sliding open with a hiss. Inside, the control station was dimly lit, powered by emergency backup systems. As their eyes adjusted, the screens and equipment flickered to life, stirred by their presence. "Look for anything that can tell us about the defense systems or any environmental controls still in operation," Jack directed, as they split up to cover more ground. Zara found her way to a console that displayed environmental data, weather patterns, geological disturbances, and more importantly, a map that highlighted safe zones and areas of heavy monster infestation. "Jack, come see this." Jack joined her, studying the map. "This is gold. We could use this to our advantage. Maybe even clear out some of the monsters if we can reactivate certain systems." They spent the next hour poring over the controls, figuring out the functionality. Zara, with her background in Zarmina's technology, was quick to understand the interfaces. Suddenly, the station shuddered, a low rumble echoing through the walls. "We've triggered something," Jack said, moving towards the source of the disturbance. They found themselves in a defense command center, where automated systems had been alerted to their presence. Screens lit up with warnings, and outside, they could hear the word drones, security measures that had lain dormant until now. Jack was at the console in seconds, working to override the protocols. "Cover me," he said as Zara took position at the door, her own weapon ready. The battle that ensued was intense. Drones designed to suppress large-scale riots or invasions were formidable opponents. Jack managed to deactivate several through his console commands, but a few got through, their stun blasts and nets designed to incapacitate. Zara proved herself not just capable, but exceptional under pressure. Her agility and sharp shooting helped keep the drones at bay, while Jack worked his magic on the system. Finally, with a triumphant "got it" from Jack, the remaining drones powered down, dropping to the ground like metal rain. Breathing heavily, they surveyed the room. "That was too close," Jack admitted, wiping sweat from his brow. "We have control now," Zara said, a hint of pride in her voice. "Let's use it to help my people." Together, they set about reprogramming the environmental controls. Jack focused on setting up a perimeter defense around the safe zones, while Zara worked to activate a localized weather system, perhaps a small-scale storm that could cleanse an area of monsters temporarily. As the suns of Zarmina began to set, casting long shadows over the land, Jack and Zara had not only reclaimed a piece of her world, but had laid the groundwork for a possible resurgence of her people. The station, now under their control, was a beacon of hope, a fortress from which they could plan their next move in the battle to reclaim Zarmina. After securing the control station and setting up its defenses, Jack and Zara worked through the night, preparing the environmental systems to launch a calculated strike against the monstrous infestation. The station's weather control capabilities, once meant to ensure perfect growing seasons and temperate climate across Zarmina, were now their best weapon. "We can generate a storm," Zara explained, fine-tuning the parameters on a faded touch panel. "But not just any storm. This will be hyper-focused, designed to disrupt the monster's breeding grounds without harming potential survivor enclaves. Jack nodded, his eyes scanning the maps they had laid out across the console. We'll need precise coordinates. Any error could lead to casualties among your people. Zara's hands were steady, despite the gravity of their task. I've cross-referenced the survivor zones with the latest satellite scans. These coordinates are our best shot. They initiated the sequence, and the station hummed to life. The ancient technology reawakened for a purpose its creators could never have envisioned. Outside, the skies began to churn as dark clouds gathered unnaturally fast, fueled by the station's powerful atmospheric manipulators. As the storm escalated, Jack monitored the energy levels. We're drawing a lot of power. The system hasn't been used at this capacity for years. It's risky. Zara kept her eyes on the environmental feedback. It's a risk we have to take. If we can clear out even a portion of the infestation, it will give my people a chance to reclaim some of their land. The storm broke with ferocious intensity, lightning streaking across the sky, illuminating the darkened landscape below. Wind howled, carrying with it the promise of renewal or destruction. Only time would tell which. Inside the safety of the control station, Jack and Zara watched the live feeds from drones they had deployed to document the storm's impact. The screens flickered with images of upheaval as the targeted areas were battered by torrential rains and fierce gusts. Suddenly, a new threat appeared on the radar, a large, moving mass distinct from the chaos of the storm. It was heading straight for the control station. "Looks like we've got company," Jack said, grabbing his weapon. "Something big is out there, and I don't think it's just seeking shelter from the storm." Zara looked at the approaching blip with determination. The alpha predator of the monsters. It must sense that we are threatening its domain. They prepared for a confrontation, barricading the main entrance and setting up defensive positions. The creature that emerged from the storm was like something born of nightmare and strife. Huge, covered in spiny armor, with glowing eyes that cut through the swirling darkness. Battle was fierce. The creature was smarter and more resilient than the others they had encountered. It seemed to understand their tactics and adapt quickly. Jack and Zara worked in tandem, one drawing its attention while the other attacked from the side, but it was a grueling fight. As the creature lunged at Jack, Zara found an opening. She fired a charged shot, hitting the creature in a vulnerable spot beneath its armored scales. The beast staggered, roared in pain and confusion, and then, with a final look at its assailants, turned and retreated into the storm. Breathing heavily, Jack looked at Zara. "You did it. You actually did it." Zara was checking the external cameras. "It's retreating, but this isn't over. It knows we're here now, and it will be back, maybe with more." Jack nodded, knowing she was right. "Then we'll be ready for it. We've proven we can defend this place." As the storm outside began to subside, they returned to their monitors. The initial reports showed significant disruption to the monster's territories, waterlogged dens and scattered packs. It was a temporary victory, perhaps, but a victory nonetheless. "This is just the beginning," Zara said, her voice firm with newfound hope. "Now we strategize, expand our safe zones, and start taking back our planet." Jack smiled, impressed and inspired by her resolve. "With you leading the way, I believe Zarmina might just have a fighting chance." Together, they began planning their next moves. The control station a beacon of light in the storm, a symbol of their small but growing resistance against the darkness that had consumed Zarmina. In the aftermath of the storm, the landscape of Zarmina began to show signs of change. Where once there had been only the dominion of monsters, now there were patches of calm, areas where the ground was slowly being reclaimed by nature's resilient touch. Jack and Zara, having spent days monitoring the effects of their engineered tempest, were cautiously optimistic about the results. "The environmental data is encouraging," Zara noted as she scanned the latest drone feeds. "Vegetation is starting to return in some areas. It's slow, but it's progress." Jack, who was busy recalibrating some of the station's external sensors, nodded in agreement. and reports of survivor sightings are up. It looks like your people are beginning to come out of hiding. They're taking back their world. Encouraged by these positive signs, they decided it was time to expand their operations. Using the control station as their base, they began to plan a series of rescue and recovery missions. Zara took the lead, organizing teams of survivors who were willing to brave the outside world to help others. As they worked, the bond between human and alien grew stronger. Jack was impressed by Zara's leadership and her innate understanding of her planet. Together, they mapped out safe routes and developed strategies to deal with potential monster attacks. One day, while reviewing the satellite imagery, Zara pointed out a particularly lush valley that had been shielded from the worst of the disaster. This could be a perfect place for a new settlement. It's defensible, fertile, and away from known monster paths. Jack looked over her shoulder at the images. Let's focus our next efforts there. If we can establish a strong presence, it might encourage more of your people to come forward. The plan was set into motion. With Jack's help, Zara coordinated a large-scale migration to the valley. They helped build temporary shelters, set up water purification systems, and laid down the foundations of what they hoped would become a thriving community. As the settlement grew, so did stories of a human who fought alongside an alien to save her world. Jack found himself an unexpected hero in the eyes of Zara's people, revered not just for his bravery, but for his compassion and understanding. One evening, as they watched the sunset from the edge of the valley, Zara turned to Jack. You could go back, back to your own explorations. You've done more than enough here. Jack looked at the thriving settlement, the laughter of children mingling with the chatter of their parents, all of them building a new life together. He then turned to Zara, who had become not just a partner in survival, but a close friend. I know I could, he admitted, but I think my journey led me here for a reason. I've found something worth staying for. He gestured at the valley, the people, and the slowly healing planet. If you'll have me, I'd like to stay on, help you rebuild. There's still so much to do. Zara's eyes gleamed with unshed tears as she smiled. We would be honored to have you stay, Jack. Your knowledge, your strength, and your spirit have given us hope. We'd like you to be a part of our new world. As they turned back to watch the night fall over Zarmina, the stars twinkling brightly above, it was clear that a new chapter was beginning, not just for Zara and her people, but for Jack as well. Together, they would continue to face challenges, perhaps even dangers, but they would do so with the strength of unity. Zarmina was no longer just a place of monsters and ruins. It was a home, a beacon of what could be achieved when humanity and alien kind worked together. It was a testament to the enduring spirit of both races, united by common goals and shared dreams. In the peace of that evening, Jack knew he had found his place in the universe. Not among the stars, but right here, on a once-forsaken planet that had been given a second chance, much like himself.